So post World War One, everybody got together and decided to create something that was very much needed in this world, and apparently very much needed by humanity and progressive societies, was to create the concept of democracy. It already existed, but I think they wanted something that was far better and more acceptable and more accepted around the world. World War II led to that being conformed in a very strong way, of course at the cost of around 70 million lives. And then everything was all about democracies and how you need to all be democratic and create concepts of democracies in your countries. And look at where that has got us, right? So we created a concept that basically is all about the one who gets the largest amount of votes, even if it's by one vote or 1%, wins, and that person begins to form the government and starts to set his cabinet and appoint his ministers or secretaries, whatever the form of democracy that exists in the country. But that's not the only thing the person does. He also gets, or she also gets, a lot of power. And that power is completely singular, which means that everything he or she wishes to happen will happen. So this person now is in control of the treasury of the country. He or she is in control of the armed forces of the country. The nuclear button of the country has nuclear power, and of course is also responsible for foreign policy and who he or she gets to call my friends and not my friends, and everybody else is in the gray area. Now these are very, very unique and special powers, and if you look at what's happened in the last 10 to 50 decades actually, you will see that this power has not been used very well. In fact, it's been used for motives that were not really democratic. So you've had elected officials as presidents or prime ministers who decided all of a sudden that COVID was not really serious, and what was really important for that country was building a wall so that you keep everybody which is not of your color of interest skin on the other side. And that became priority, and COVID wasn't, and that country suffered. Then you had other elected officials who decided that what is important is to wave a very strong flag of religion and decide to tell their majority supporters that everybody else who's not in that religion is actually on the other side, and the other side is not a good side. So that led to mass racist activity within the country, including public lynching, and that didn't stop that. This leader also decided to call for large election rallies when COVID was clearly spreading, and again that country suffered. You had elected officials who decided that we'll get out of this treaty and that treaty, we'll get out of the World Health Organization because it's not a cool organization to be with, climate and environment is not really serious, we'll kind of take a back seat. And guess what, around 40 odd nations got together to work out a nuclear deal with the so-called problem state. And after around 6 or 7 years, I decided to call it quits because I just don't like the way things are being negotiated. Now, everything that elected officials do has consequences, because that affects not just that country, other countries as well. So some of these examples were that these so-called progressive democracies decided to also spread their word of democracy and their brand of democracy to other countries who had dictators. So they said, oh, we need to free you, we need to create a concept of democracy in your country, you need to have real freedom. Of course, the motives were completely different, right? They will not admit to it, that the motives had nothing to do with creating a power block for themselves in that region. The motives had nothing to do with selling weapons in that region. The motives had nothing to do with, signing huge contracts in that region. And guess what? All of those examples of so-called creating democracies in dictator-filled countries have led those countries today in shambles. Hundreds of thousands of people have died. Millions have been displaced. Typical civil wars are being witnessed, and then those so-called progressive democracies that started the whole thing have walked away. and said, well, guess what? This is your problem, not mine. I've got what I wanted and I'm out of there. Is this the form of democracy that our forefathers wanted for us? Is this the kind of power that one person should have? Is this the kind of leverage that the winning party should get? For 4 years, nothing can happen to these people. In fact, the brand of democracy and concept of democracy is so desired and such a great brand that even dictators want it. They create elections within their countries and they say, hey guys, you know what? We're going to have elections. And they won by 90% and sometimes 99% because they force everybody to vote for them. All right. And sometimes they're actually winning elections unopposed because there's nobody brave enough to stand in front of this guy. This is how democracy is desired, and this is how democracy has become. The winning side's voters don't give a two-hoot to the other side. So 4 years of complete honeymoon, do what you wish, you get away, you can walk away doing anything because that's how it's working. I think it's important for everybody to understand what we've become and not just continue something because it exists the way it is. I think democracy really needs a rework. It really needs to have more emphasis towards what it was created for, which was equal voice, which was freedom, which was the concept of giving everybody opportunity. Imagine, if democracy was working so great, why am I still being called at events that are about giving rights to women? To my knowledge and research, almost half the world is women. They must be voting. And if they're voting for their leaders, why aren't those leaders getting them the rights that they deserved 50 years ago? Not in 2021. We can't be still happy with 7 or 9 prime ministers and presidents who are women, 50 or 60 CEOs who are women. This is what it has become. The brand of democracy is not really giving what the forefathers set out for it to do. So I think it's time for everybody to think about this very important concept, because you now have elected officials who actually decide that the best form of defense is attack. Well, guess what? That's Mike Tyson's theory, not an elected official's theory. You don't attack until there's nothing left there and then claim, well, guess what? You started this. I think everybody really needs to get back to understanding this concept and probably tweaking it in a manner by which it makes sense and it fits the purpose that it was created for. And that's why I ask all of you, are you living in a democracy or are you actually living in a fool's paradise? Ask yourself.